just kind of talked about, we were just talking about some of the crazy weather we've been having. Welcome to the Funding Cornucopia workshop with Benji Biddle and Cynthia Ricks-McAtan, who I'll introduce in just a minute. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you before, my name is Marcy Boulay, and I'm the Communities of Focus Coordinator at the Health Department, along with my mighty colleagues, Tony and Daniel. And we've had the pleasure of working together with Cynthia and Virginia Mason Franciscan Health to do 4 different workshops and with some other partners too over the last year around capacity building and raising funds and looking for ways to build relationships with funders, all in support of strengthening community and offering support to all the wonderful work that people do around Tacoma-Pierce County. So whether this is your first workshop with us or your 4th or anywhere in between, welcome, and we're really glad you're here with us. Just to get us started, if you would like, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and pronouns and any affiliation if you want to mention. And then just a question, because we are in a season of change, weather, all kinds of things are changing. And it's always great to think about focusing on gratitude and things that we're thankful for, and always good to focus on finding that joy and the gratitude. So please add to your name, your pronouns, and any affiliation you want to list something you're grateful for, whether it's brings you joy, fulfillment, peace, laughter, keeps you sane. What is something that you are, what are you grateful for? What brings you gratitude in this moment in time? So feel free to do some introducing here. Thanks, Cynthia. Us too. We're grateful for you. So feel free to add your information in the chat. And again, if you're just joining, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, pronouns, any affiliation, and something that you're grateful for. Wood stove. Yeah, Sarah. That's great, especially when you lose power, right? Wood stove, gas stove, anything that we can keep heat. Great. Yeah, family, colleagues. Yep. Being present out in KP office. Nice. Thanks, everybody. So feel free to keep introducing yourselves as we get started here. So again, we're really glad that you're here with us. And so we're going to spend the next hour and a half with Benji and Cynthia and what Cynthia named Funding Cornucopia, appreciators of bringing in the bounty. Can we have the next slide, please? So here's our agenda. And I'm going to turn it over in just a minute to Benji and Cynthia. But again, if you haven't joined us before, this is the 4th workshop in the last year that we've partnered together to support capacity building and raising dollars and building relationships with funders. And we're really lucky to have Benji Biddle, who's our business development manager at Tacoma-Pierce County Health Department, has a ton of experience in grant seeking and fund development and relationship building, and the amazing Cynthia Ricks-McAtan with Virginia Mason Franciscan Health, who's been sharing her time and wisdom with us over this past year with a lot of experience in grant seeking and also grant giving and fund development. So thank you both very much for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. So the people who do our yard decided to come today. They usually come after 3. So I have my earbuds on. If you have difficulty hearing me, just flag me down so I can do something differently. It is great to be here. Benji, it is awesome to see you. The last time I was in the Communities of Focus meeting, I was without you and I was having a rough time. So I do much better with you. You are definitely
Thank you.
An awesome spirit. Thank you. So disclaimers today. This is not Grant Writing 101. We've done that workshop before. This is about some of the comments that we heard that you wanted us to follow up on after the Grant Writing 101. And we've kind of got them into three categories that we wanted to discuss with you today. Please note, however, that there will be lots of information that will help you be able to write your grant. Okay, so we're not going to cover everything that we covered in Grant 101. We're covering those questions that we discussed a few weeks ago that you shared with us. We're not covering all of those questions, but just some of them. The other disclaimer I'd like to make is that even though I've got over 3 decades, yes, I know I look 18, over 3 decades of grant writing experience, doesn't mean that each time I write them, I get them. And doesn't mean each time I submit them that I feel good about what I submitted. Like there's always something I know I can tweak. So just like everything in life, practice, 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 and don't get discouraged. If there was a no, find out why. That's really important because it may not be you. It might have been there was just so much competition, right? So those are my disclaimers. Benji, what disclaimers do you have?
I'm not sure it's a disclaimer, more like an amplifier. What I'll say is there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And so while Cynthia and I have raised lots of money in the community and, we're happy to be here facilitating, all of you have a lot of experience too. I see people from organizations that I've worked with closely who are doing just awesome work already. And so it's a small enough group that I really want to encourage you all to interact with us and share your wisdom. If you have a specific question or something you disagree with even, feel free to pipe up. I just want this to be very conversational as compared to presentational. And we look forward to having a good conversation with you. What are you talking about, Cornucopia, Cynthia? What are you talking about?
I'm glad you asked. Some of you may not know what cornucopia is. So according to Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, right, it comes from the Latin cornucopia, which translates literally horn of plenty. So what are we talking about? Getting plenty of bounty to fund your project and programs to meet the needs in your communities. That's what we're talking about. And I'm kind of one of those, I'm sort of like a Seattle African-American version of Martha Stewart. And so, I want the presentation to look nice, bringing in the bounty in a beautiful horn that's going to be used to just do amazing and phenomenal things. So that is what we mean by funding cornucopia. Benji, does that work?
It works for me. It works for me. Show me the money, Cynthia.
Will do. All right, next slide, please. So the first area we're going to talk about is making your ideas real. Next slide, please. So Benji, was this you or me?
I'll just add something quickly. I think, we can go back and forth here. For me, there's a leap of faith. There were several questions that the group put forward for us to answer today that all had a little bit of what I would call healthy insecurity. Like people just wanting to know, like, what is really a good idea? How do I know if my idea is a good idea or not? And so I wanted to address that before Cynthia really answered the question more directly around identifying the problem and root causes and stuff, and say there is a leap of faith involved in this work. Often we're trying to come up with a new response to a problem that has been around a very long time. And so we're asking funders to take a leap of faith with us. And to be honest, sometimes we may believe that we're going to try this and it's going to have a different outcome than before. Sometimes that's true and sometimes it isn't true, even when you get all the funding in the world. But it doesn't mean that it was not worth trying, right? So I just wanted to say, as a way of context, don't be afraid to ask. Don't feel like you need to know 1,000% that this has been proven a million different places. We know if we do X, this Y will happen. Funders will ask you questions to get as close to that as possible, but truly it's speculative. It's a bit like writing science fiction. You're saying if this one thing were different, then the universe we live in would be different because of that, because it resonates through our whole nonprofit system. So, not to say it's untruthful, just that there's a bit of speculation in this work, and that aspirational heart of it is really connected to your mission and vision and values and all of that. We're trying to get to that vision that you want as an organization.
Thank you, Benji. That is so true. So keeping that in mind, then the goal of this section is to really help you frame your ideas, to frame your ideas in such a way that you can present them to funders. Okay, so that's kind of like the goal. And again, it's it's a trial and error sometimes. So here we go. Here's a strategy to use to frame it. First of all, what is the problem, right? Define the problem. Then you would include root causes and develop strategies and come up with outcome measures. So let's start, for example, culturally relevant food. Let's say you're on the key pen. Hey there, Kelly, I see you from Red Barn. Just wanted to give you a shout out. Good to see you. And let's say that 20% of your Spanish-speaking population does not have appropriate food. There is a food desert, and those folks are missing 3 to 4 meals a day, or 2 to 3 meals a day. Like they just don't have culturally appropriate food. So there might be a lot of questions about that, right? You want to address it. So define the problem. Right? The problem is we have a segment of our population that does not have culturally relevant food. There's a food desert. It's not culturally appropriate. Okay, well, why is that? Is it because of transportation? Is it because there is no grocery stores near there that has the type of food that they need? Is there because there's a language issue and they can't get there? We call it the 5 whys. But if you keep asking why is this a problem? And why to that question? And why to that response? And why? By the time you get to the 5th why, you probably have gotten to the root of why this is a problem. So again, define the problem. What's going on here? And then ask 5 whys about that problem to try to figure out what is the root cause. And then we would move on to developing some kind of strategies, and then look at measuring those outcomes when we have strategies. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So here might be some strategies, right? Maybe we could look at transportation. Can we get food to those people? Is it an income insecurity? They can't afford the food. Is there a food desert? Is there a language barrier? Maybe there's also a housing insecurity. Like even if they had the food, they wouldn't have a place to store it, right? So it could be a variety of issues. Your root cause analysis is key. You always ask the why, because the more and more you ask the why, the more and more you could develop strategies and sort of scope out what area that you want to focus in. Maybe you can't address income insecurities, and maybe you can't address the food desert, but maybe you can address the language barrier and the transportation piece, right? So this, by looking at the root cause analysis, it'll help you sort of figure out what's within my wheelhouse that we can address, right? And be transparent about it. Next one, please. And then you would come up with some strategies. For example, can you get the food to the food desert? Or can you build a grocery store? Or maybe there's both. Can you provide transportation? Is there Lyft or Uber who could deliver the food? Is the food culturally appropriate? Now, remember, if we go back to our example, we asked the question, the community that we're talking about speaks Spanish. Maybe there are some cultural needs there for that community in terms of food. So can you get that food to them that is culturally appropriate? And do you need recipes and education materials that you can provide to that community? And do they need to be translated? And do you need interpreters? Like, how are you going to sign up people for food, right? If you're going to have it delivered, unless you have interpreters that can speak the language of the community in which you're trying to serve, right? And can you partner with other agencies? So maybe you have access to the food and you have access to doing translation. But maybe there is an organization out there who can provide the transportation and who can also do the nutrition recipes for you, right? So that's a partnership, a way to get the food to those folks to meet their needs. So always look at what other agencies are out there that can help us solve this problem as we framed it. Benji, do you have
Yeah,
anything to add?
you hit the nail on the head. I think one of the things that I'd like to see nonprofits do more actively is talk to their clients about who else they're going for services. Like, I think we do a good job of understanding what people need from us, but not the gaps that we have that they're finding other sources in the community. And that tells you a lot, I think, about who your partners can be to really effectively serve the whole person or the whole community. Just, for what it's worth, it takes a little bit of time. I know often there's issues of confidentiality and stuff that, you have to kind of pay attention to. I totally respect that. But to the extent you can understand where people are getting their needs met and what's outside your wheelhouse, that you don't need to provide everything, like Cynthia said, but if you can be articulate about how you're partnering together and coordinating, it'll help the whole system, I think, and it'll definitely help funders see that you understand how to serve the people you're trying to serve.
Absolutely, Benji, absolutely. And Benji said something that's really key. He said, talk to your clients, talk to your customer base,
Yeah.
the community in which you're trying to serve. If they're not involved in the program design and having some input, then what's the point? I mean, honestly, they have the answers. They know how they want it, when they want it, and why they need it. So definitely be in dialogue. That relationship is so important because if you don't have a relationship and you're providing this service, you may find out that people don't have a relationship with you and don't trust and don't want that food that you have delivered, right? So again, relationships are so important with the community that you serve. They should be at the table having a discussion, letting you know this is what our issues are, and this is how we would like it to happen. Doesn't mean you can always meet it in the parameters that the community you serve has suggested, but at least they're at the table helping you define the problem and figuring out the strategies. And that's really, really important. Next slide, please. So if you sit back, you actually might have a proposal, right? If you sit down and you say, what's our problem? And let's do the 5 whys. Why is that an issue? And then why is that one an issue? And then why is that one an issue? And then you develop some strategies on how to develop it. You now have scoped it out and talked about it. Now you can put it on paper or even on video. So for example, let's go back to our culturally relevant food issue that we have. That's the problem. So let's say from there, we've determined that we need $250,000 to address food insecurities in a food desert. And how are we going to solve that issue? We need $100,000 for food delivery costs. We need $50,000 for culturally relevant organizations to provide and expand the delivery to cultural communities in this particular zip code. And guess what? We have a partner that's going to provide in-kind interpretation and translation services, right? So there it is. So if you frame the problem, come up with know the root causes, come up with some strategies, know who the other folks out there who are doing this kind of work you could possibly partner with, and you definitely have your community that you're serving at the table, then you can say, how much will it cost to do those kinds of things, right? And there is your proposal. You can even write it down. Here's our problem. Here's the root causes. Here's the strategies we're going to use. Here are the people and the organizations that are going to help us get there. And here's the budget that we need that covers those strategies and the various partners' role in address with these various strategies. That's a quick way to sort of frame your proposal and to get your ideas going. Benji?
I think that's great. I was just going to see if anybody had any questions related to this section. We're kind of at a turning point to go into our next item, I think. But wanted to see if people had comments, any questions about developing your proposal. You guys are quiet today, taking it easy on us. All right. Well, if you get brave, feel free to chime in as we go forward here. So the next section we're going to talk about is connecting to funders. And those of you who've known me a while, I have been preaching this gospel around the South Sound for 20 some odd years now. So forgive me if you're hearing me say the same thing I usually say right off the bat. But I really do believe it to be more true now than ever before. Next slide, please, Tony. I think that we have to stop thinking about humans as walking ATMs. A lot of the disconnect between the sector, whether it's government agencies or nonprofits asking for funding from corporations, from foundations, from individuals, has to do with it being a transaction, right? I think it's easy for us to know our worth, know what we want to do, and assume that if we just articulate our case and punch in the right buttons and have the right answers to the questions, that magically the money will just flow out. And that's just not the case. Funders are like us. They're an incredibly diverse group of folks all over the political spectrum, all over the religious spectrum, all kinds of different values, all kinds of different reasons why they're doing what they do, all kinds of different ways they look to improve community, and some of them don't frankly agree what improving the community would look like amongst themselves. So they're really individuals, and that's complicated. And I know that I wish it was an easy fix. I wish, if you just wrote a beautiful grant application that it would get funded every time. But that's not the reality of this, because what one person thinks is a fabulous grant application sometimes is not the same thing that somebody else is looking for. So it really is individual and customized, which means that you have to start thinking about building relationships with foundations, corporations, individuals, whomever it is that you're trying to fundraise from, government agencies like us. So next slide, please. So, what do you do when you're trying to build a relationship, right? And I say this in humility. Like, I learned this by doing this the wrong way myself 30, 40 years ago, right? Like, I sent out flurries of letters and proposals from behind my computer for a very good cause and just expected the money to start flowing in. And I got a flood of rejections. And it was like, okay, well, I've got to change my strategy. What do? I have to get money flowing. What am I going to do? And so I've made so many mistakes over time. I just want to own that, as part of the process. So don't immediately ask for money, generally speaking. You really want to try to have a conversation, or if possible, to develop a track record with someone before you ask for money. That's particularly true with individuals. Sometimes foundations and corporations, you can make your first contact and ask, but you want that to be qualified with some conversation and even some back and forth on email, something. So it's not just kind of coming out of the blue. I think you do yourself a disservice when you think about that. Like everything else, thinking about people as what you need from them is not going to help build a long-term relationship, right? The reality is funders are also looking for stuff from you to deliver on their mission and values, but it's more nuanced than that, and it needs to come from a relationship based of mutual respect whenever possible. I've been on both sides of that, and it's not always the greatest relationship. But if you can find common ground with people and then over time find more and more people that have that like set of values with you, then you develop the right network to support what you're doing. I am a big believer in friend raising versus fundraising. And, really, I'd rather have folks I can count on and know I can count on and that will be there with me over the long term and not chase lots of little dollars from folks who I'm going to have to reconvince every time. It's an uphill battle. And so, holding people close, bringing them along with you is really important. Why don't I stop there, Cynthia, and get you to chime in?
Well, um, some ways that you can build relationships is to find out who else in the organization or who else out there are doing similar work or complementary work, right? And build relationships with them and see who's funding, who's providing the resources to help those other organizations and agencies do the work that they're doing. So again, your friend raising, you are building relationships and possibly, building a coalition, right? Sometimes we're stronger together than we are individually. Ask them who they know and ask them for referrals. If you think about it, what do we do now? We have a lot of people who are on social media. And if they like something and you get a lot of likes, all of a sudden you've got several thousand people. Some of them have hundreds of thousands and they're followers, right? And they now are an influencer. So what is the greatest form of flattery, right? Is someone who copies you and mimics you, right? And so in order for that to happen, you can say to another organization, I want to be just as great as you are. How did you get there? Can you refer me, right? And there's your like, right? And so again, building those relationships. Another place that you can build relationships are at libraries. They have a plethora of information, right? And they're also in the business of providing resources now. It used to be that our libraries, back during the Dewey Decimal System days, where you had to look at an index card and know where 125.64382 EK was, right? For those of you where that doesn't resonate, just Google Dewey Decimal. The way you built a relationship was to go on microfiche and look up things and talk to your librarians. Well, now because we have such, digital information, there are way more resources that are available that our libraries have at our disposal. So use them. And you might find out that they're actually doing workshops, that there are meetings happening of coalitions and groups and agencies. You might see that a city council or one of the local commissions, a county commission or a rural commission or a local commission is meeting, or a task force or a group is meeting regularly at the library. Tap into those, right? Find out who's there. Find out what access to resources that they might have and what information they might have. And so become friendly with your library. That is a great place. And then there are tons of online resources, right? If you just looked up grants for food insecurities for Spanish-speaking populations, I mean, and especially with AI being out there, of course, use that with be careful. But again, if you were to do that, resources would pop up, right? So again, use those things that are already out there and at your disposal. Another thing you could do is look up those organizations, see who's funding them, because again, flattery, right? What do funders want? They want to be recognized for the work that they've done. At least a lot of them do. And so other organizations that they funded will be required to put on their website, this was supported by, X, Y, and Z funder and this corporation and this foundation. So that's a great way to look up as well. Next
Yep,
slide.
the one thing I think you haven't said anything about yet, Cynthia, I just wanted to tag on one thing, which is referrals from other funders. So if you have one or two funders that really get what you do and are passionate about what you do, I would definitely ask them who else they think would be interested in funding. And sometimes they'll offer to make a connection for you or, at a minimum, send a letter or an email or something on your behalf. Sometimes they'll actually be in the meeting with you when you're asking a new funder, in my experience. These are folks in Pierce County I'm thinking of specifically. And often it's those family foundations in particular that the small family foundations tend to talk to each other quite a bit. and lean on each other and partner together quite a bit. And so if you get one or two of them on board, then they can help you up that number to three or four more, and you sort of build over time that way.
Thank you, Benji. Thank you. That is so true. And remember, this is about building relationships. It shouldn't just be one and done unless you find that the mission and the vision and the core values and the way those a particular funder or funders operate is not consistent with your organization. You should be in this relationship for a while, right? And so you just don't want to show up one or two times, get a little funding, and then you're gone. That's not how it works, right? You need to be in this for the long haul. You are now actively dating, right? Next slide, please. Another thing that people often forget about is who are our governmental officials? Who's our mayor, our city councils, our county council, our commissions, right? And who are our state reps? They have access to funding. They know what the city's budget is. They know what the county's budget is. They know, your state reps know what agencies are proposed for funding and what the governor's budget looks like and what may be available. And they may even have access to some funding to address some priorities that, they themselves might have in their communities. Build a relationship with them. Show up to city councils and county councils periodically. Show up to a commission meeting. If you have a human services or community development commission in your community, they typically are responsible for allocating and making funding recommendations to the city or the county for local human services funding, sometimes even capital funding that would go out to the community. Build a relationship with them. Know who those staff persons are that staff those commissions and do the actual contracts for agencies that are awarded funding. So you'll know what the expectations are. So you can get on the listserv and know what's available. And they may have access to other funding resources because they themselves might participate as a city, right? They might participate in a local city's group of funders in their county. Wouldn't it be great to know what they're discussing and how they might be rolling out common applications and priorities and be a part of that and be able to address that during public comment period? Because you want to make sure that the needs in your community match and reflect the priorities of the funders. And the only way to do that is to show up and comment, right? So start building those relationships. What is it that your community you serve need from those elected officials to address the problem? You should have a one-pager or a couple of one-pagers that address the various problems and the strategies and what the ask would be: 50,000, 250, 1 million, etc. A little, a scoping kind of proposal that you can bring to them, because most elected officials, if you can't capture them within the first 3 minutes, so we've been told, it's, not going to happen. So you can make your best case and have something written. If your local state representative tells you they've got 15 minutes, that probably really only means they've got 4.5. You've got 3 minutes to make your best case and 1.5 minutes for them to tell you how they expect you to follow up. So have it concise, ready to go, because you never know where that can lead. Oftentimes, those elected officials have staff who will get in touch with you and do some of the research themselves. We found 4 or 5 foundations that we know work in our community that address these kinds of things. Let's help you build a relationship. Call so-and-so, right? And do the warm handoff. And make sure you follow up, right? And be sure to thank your electeds, right? So again, you look at the people who you voted for or who are in charge of addressing your local government and county and state government to see what resources they might have. Look at the state departments that are responsible for addressing whatever it is in your community. So for example, If you're dealing with youth, for example, who are coming back out of being incarcerated, then you want to look at DCYF, right? Because they're in charge of juvenile detention. If they're coming from the county level, then you want to look at your county juvenile justice system, right? So again, start building relationships with those state and local departments that are responsible for providing programming or responsible for addressing the needs of the community that you're in. Start building a relationship. And here's another thing, get on their listservs. I know it gets kind of hectic and overwhelming. So maybe within your organization, if you have 2 or 3 people and you each agree to take 5 listservs that you're going to be on and follow up, so that when you do meet, that's now 15 listservs amongst the 3 of you. And that's great information, because then you can go through and say, this one works for us, this one doesn't. All you need is a couple. Sometimes all you need is 1, but you might have to go through 10 to 12 in order to get that 1 to 3. And that's okay. Spread the love. Benji?
I think one of the things you haven't talked about yet is federal. And there's a number of groups on the call today that are large enough that you could definitely be asking for federal appropriations as well. Foundation for Tacoma Students, Multicultural Child Family Hope Center, Asia Pacific Cultural Center. I'm looking at you guys, right? Oasis, probably because of your track record. And what I would say is, we don't know what the future holds. It doesn't look pretty for federal funding in a lot of the programs that we care about and normally apply for. But what we do know is that we have the co-chair of appropriations, the minority chair lead, as our rep, right? So Patty Murray is in a key role. She's probably only going to be there for another 5 or 6 years. And I promise you, what she wants to do in that time is bring as much money into our communities as humanly possible. So I would be bold. I would, talk to folks, talk to, the folks that Cynthia mentioned. If you've got champions at the state level, fantastic. If you've got champions at the local level, even fantastic. Work with them. And there are aides at the congressional offices who annually send out an email to say, now's the time, send me your ideas in the next 2 weeks, and we'll put it into the federal appropriations package, right? And so it's a very short window. You kind of have to know what you want from them in advance and have it kind of defined so you can just hit send when they send you the email. But it really does work. And I think the same is true on the state level to some extent now. Like, despite all of the craziness in the system, the state legislature is still very well positioned to support Pierce County cultural organizations of all kinds, right? Both from a fiscal level, even though there's a crunch in the budget this year, right? I've worked some with Oasis, so I'll pick on you in Oasis, Daniel. Like, now we have both Lori Jenkins in the House, Speaker of the House, who's openly gay, and the new minority leader of the Senate, Jamie Peterson, is also an openly gay man. So there's going to be all kinds of opportunities for groups to do policy work, to do budget asks and such that just would not have been possible. So I would say it's easy for us right now to look at what went wrong last month in the election and just sort of want to curl up in a ball. But there's a world of opportunities. And if it's not coming out of one pocket from the federal government, you got to start picking the other pocket. So that is my advice to you. That's what I'm doing at the health department this year.
Benji, I'm so glad you said that. That brings to mind something else that is so important. Is to look at who are the state and Senate reps who sit on the various committees that govern the type of funding that is addressing the problem that you are trying to address, right? So if it's dealing with housing and the unhoused, then who sits on that committee that provides funding to the Washington State Housing Finance Commission? Who provides the funding, right? Which committee does that go through? Who is the chair of that committee? Who are the co-chairs? And even if they're not in your legislative district, build a relationship with them and especially their staff. So you can find out when they're going to be meeting to discuss funding to the agencies that you would be able to apply to for funding. So you can find out what the bill looks like, the funding package that's being proposed that's going to that agency. Is it something that you can access? And if not, you might want to comment on it. And TVW should become your friend. T as in Tom, V as in Victor, W as in wow. TVW is free. They provide all of the hearings and committee meetings, and oftentimes some of the sessions, the overview and working sessions that happen in Olympia. So they have a station, and if you don't have access to TVW station, that's okay. You can subscribe to them online and see what the schedule is, right? And they also have a listserv that you can join, especially if you are particularly interested in a certain hearing that might be happening, right? So you can also access recordings of those sessions and work groups and committee meetings and hearings at TVW. Katie's asking where you can find those listservs. Katie, before we finish today, I will put in TVW's information. So I promise to do that. Thank you. But again, TVW should become your friend too, especially if you're going after state funding. Okay? Thank you, Benji, for reminding me of that. TVW is our friend. Next slide, please. So,
right.
Oh, go ahead, Benji.
I'll start off, but feel free to tag team as always, Cynthia. So how do you find resources? Who does the work in other communities? So I really do believe in figuring out who else is doing similar bodies of work. There's so much to do, if not together, then at least to be aware of one another so that you can describe how your work is complementary to them or fills gaps or whatever. Really think about how you think about it from a systems point of view and how you want to build your organization with partners to have the outcomes that you want. I mean, often if you're really trying to address those root causes that Cynthia is talking about, it's way bigger and way more than any single agency can do alone. But you also don't want to think that you need 12 partners for every project. You really want to figure out who the key ones are and then focus on building a relationship with them. Cynthia's talked about the listservs already. Coalitions are great. There are fabulous, like human services coalitions here. There are multi-faith coalitions in Pierce County. The Coalition to End Homelessness comes to mind as another very active one here in Pierce County. I know there's probably food justice groups. There are similar coalitions that happen on the funding side of the table as well. So funders that are interested in a particular subject area will get together every so often, either in a formal setting organized by Philanthropy Northwest or in an informal setting. And so plugging into those coalitions can be great. One of the sort of game changers, once you get enough relationship with enough different funders, is to be invited into those funder coalition kind of meetings to talk and share your wisdom. I've done that a number of times over the years, and just there's nothing better than staying humble and just answering people's questions in that setting and having access to all of those people at the same time to hear what it is they need to hear from you in order to be supportive or where they see the gaps in what you're doing. I think the first couple of times I did it, I was probably a little bit too cocky. I probably went in there with less an orientation of listening to what they had to say and more about what I needed from them. And so what I've learned over time is if you ever are in that position where you get to meet with a group of funders that have invited you, really listen more than you talk in that situation. Let them guide the conversation. They'll tell you what it is they need to know in order to be supportive. They'll tell you how much they're interested in supporting. It's a lot more about listening than trying to pitch them something all the time. Although, you've got to have that in your hip pocket too. So it's definitely a dance. But those coalitions can be very, very helpful. And obviously, households in the communities, who they know, and can connect you to resources as well. I love all your Pooh Bear stuff, Cynthia. Pooh Bear was my growing up book. So my eldest sister and I used to play Pooh Sticks on a bridge in Auburn, Alabama when she was going to Auburn, and I was like 3 at the time. So many good Pooh memories from your graphics.
Thank you. I love Winnie the Pooh, and I also love how easy it is for Pooh to make friends and how Christopher Robbins made a bunch of friends because of his relationship with Pooh, right?
Yeah.
They're long lasting. Even when they got into arguments,
Yeah.
they stayed friends. And so that's what this is about, right? We'll be friends forever, won't we? And even longer, right? So you got to be in for the long haul. And one thing that Benji mentioned that I think is so key is listening, but also asking, how can we be available and help support you? So, for example, maybe a particular funding organization is looking for people to review applications when they come in. Perhaps someone in your organization or someone from your community you can recommend to participate. Now, you might have to recuse that person from participating in the application process that you're writing, right? And they might not be able to review your application when it comes in. But being there and knowing what that process is and how it works, and having someone on the inside who later can come back and talk about, here's how we discuss the scoring rubric. Here's how we discuss the funding mechanism, the funding priorities. Here are how we made some of our decisions, right? So again, make yourself available so that you can learn how the funders are doing their processes. And then you'll have some knowledge to help when you are, in fact, able to apply, right? Maybe it's helping get the word out. You have listservs and access to a community, so perhaps you could, provide more information from those funders to your community. Perhaps it's galvanizing your community to show up at a hearing or an event that the funders are doing. These are ways to build relationships, but to also come from, not just the perspective of we need, but also we're here to help. That this is really, a friendship where there's give and take. It's reciprocal. Next slide, please. So one thing that I've learned from Pooh, and I think Benji and I just totally agree with this, is that if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. That means that the community you serve should be at the table. And that means you should be building relationships with other agencies and funders, and even those that do policy and program development that is going to impact the work that you do, right? So go together. Don't go alone. You don't have to be on an island. And the more you know what's happening in your community, the better. So again, like Benji mentioned early on, that ask the people in the community who you're trying to serve who they know and what they need, right? The more you know, the better you can address the problem and know what resources that you might be able to access. And it can add value. It can make your case a lot stronger. Benji, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I think they get it. I'm seeing lots of nods.
Good. All right, next slide, please. And so, I love this part. Effective partnering. I'm going to try to control myself. I love this part. Because we don't want to go it alone. And Pooh had such interesting friends if you think about it, right? Next
Totally.
slide, please. So let's talk about building a relationship. When you're going after funds, that's a relationship. You're basically married to that funder. There's actually a contract, a memorandum of agreement or understanding, where you're talking about relationships, right? The relationship of that marriage. Think of this as a prenup that converts to an agreement, period, for the term of your relationship, for the term. And you've got to work with those folks. And they might actually, the funders may actually have to come out and observe the work that you're doing out in the community. Are those the types of people from those funders that you want to have exposure to your community? Maybe you need to think differently about how you protect your community. Again, not all money is good money, right? And be specific as possible regarding the communities that you serve. If you are serving a specific community, I think of those, for example, who have experienced domestic violence. There are just certain things that's non-negotiable when it comes to serving people who have experienced domestic violence, right? Security, safety is number one, and we can't do anything to jeopardize that, right? And so if that's the case in your community or whatever those non-negotiables are, be very clear and very specific, like, this is what we need. And if we can't have it that way, we might have to walk, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think I've learned over time, again, learned the hard way mostly, that trying to rephrase things or repitch things a different way so that you access folks that are a little bit different than you on a values level eventually doesn't work, right? Like my experience around it has been with the health department, we're super duper committed to equity in what we do. And there are some funders in Pierce County who, if you say equity, they just turn the page and move on to the next organization. And for a period of time, I really worked with folks to try to get them to understand you can still support us. We agree on 90% of it. But the reality is, if they really don't get what it is that you are trying to do on that values level, they're going to figure it out sooner or later, right? I'm going to be speaking on TV. I'm going to be talking about health equity. They're going to see that. It's always going to end badly. And I say that again with a lot of humility because I think there have been issues where a lot of our local funders have come a long way, right? Like one of the isms that I work with a lot is around homophobia, transphobia, those kinds of issues. And so funders have come a long distance in Pierce County from 20, 30 years ago, but there are still funders who are diabolically opposed to rights for the folks that some of the organizations on the call today are serving. And so I just don't think it serves anyone to try to make yourself desirable to folks that at the end of the day really don't respect you or value you. And I had to learn that the hard way. I tried to be all things to all people for a long time. And then I just realized the more I could stand in my own power and really articulate my values or the values of the organization, it just saved myself a lot of grief. It saved a lot of conflict later when they figured out that, I was still out there preaching about equity. So learn from my mistakes is my advice on that one.
Thank you. So true. I've been there too. As my father would say, a hard head makes a soft bottom, and that's been me. I've got my head knocked around a few times.
Yeah, and Katie, you're right. Like putting up a front is totally exhausting as well.
Yes, yes, it is. And just think, again, it's all about the communities that we serve and making sure that they're safe and okay, right? And the communities we serve, the people we serve, they're very resilient. And the last thing we want to do is create another barrier for them and another challenge, and for yourself also. Next slide, please. So I love this one too, fiduciary agreement, right? So a lot of folks asked about that at the last meeting. What is a fiduciary agreement and how do we find the right people? So a fiduciary agreement basically says that this organization is going to receive the money because perhaps they meet the requirements of this particular fund source to meet it, in order for you to be able to do the work. So for example, oftentimes you might use an organization that is a nonprofit and has a 501c3. Maybe you're a 501c4, which is an advocating kind of organization. And if the funding streams that you're going for says that you must be a nonprofit that has a lot of exemption ability, i.e. a 501c3, then you might look for an organization who does that. So let's say you go to Oasis and they become your fiduciary agent because they have that nonprofit status. But they also need to have the ability to accept the funds, to account for the funds specifically for your project. And if they're going to be the entity that is responsible for doing the report out to the funders, you need to make sure that, and of course you won't have an issue with this with Oasis because they're amazing, but that you have a designated person within Oasis that you talk with on a regular basis, that you provide this information in. They know how they're going to get it, when they're going to get it, when the reporting is going to be done. If there's videos or any other confidential information, that you are able to transmit that information to the person who is within your fiduciary agent, to know that it's protected information and it won't be shared with others, that it'll go to the funder as agreed upon, and that the frequency of that information and the frequency and knowing the way it's supposed to be provided and the how and to whom, and that you guys have the right, correct information on who are the responsible entities between the fiduciary agent and the organization that is actually providing the services, or the grassroots organization that's actually providing the services. You need to have all of that in an agreement. Who does what, when, where, how, right? And I would also encourage you to make sure that you get a statement of the finances periodically from the fiduciary agent, so you can see that they are in fact taking account of the money the way that it should be. So the fiduciary agent, let's say, you get a grant for $250,000 and the fiduciary is getting 10. You want to make sure that that other $240,000 is in a secure account that's being dispersed appropriately, and that there's oversight on that, and that it is being reported on a regular basis to the funder, but also to yourself, so you can keep track, right? Just like the fiduciary agent is going to want to make sure that you're actually doing the work, that you are collecting the data, that you are meeting the needs of that community, and that you are meeting your goals and objectives and your outcomes for the grant, right? So all of that should be in the agreement. And then it's really important to make sure that the fiduciary agent or the possible fiduciary prospect has the capacity to carry out the work. If you know you're going after XYZ foundation to be your fiduciary agent, but over the last couple of years, there's been rumors that a couple of people have stolen funds from the organization and mismanaged them. If you know they had an IRS finding a couple of years ago and it still has not been resolved, that may not be the organization that you want to be your fiduciary agent, right? If you know that they've had a lot of turnover in their board, and the board is the current board members, there's some issues with nepotism, etc., again, that may not be the right organization to be your fiduciary agent. And if your fiduciary agent, which Benji alluded to earlier, has some thoughts and paradigms that aren't consistent with your organization and aren't inclusive of the group that you are representing, then perhaps they're not the right agency for you either to be the fiduciary agreement.
Yeah, if they have new leadership recently, maybe consider another option for sure, right? Like, there have been cases where fiduciary agents did not act honorably in our community in the not so distant past. So, having those agreements in place really helped untangle the mess in that situation, but not getting that far along in the problem, of course, would have been ideal. So, not saying Oasis in particular could have done anything differently in that situation. I don't think that was the case, but if you do have qualms about it, listen to your gut is what I've learned. And even if people are telling you that things are going well, still look at the financials. That's that's the other advice, what Cynthia said, right? Like there's trust and then there's putting yourself in a bad position. And so even with an organization that I trust now, I would still pay close attention to what's going on with them in a way that's informed by my experience with all of this.
Absolutely. And you can also ask other organizations that have worked with the fiduciary prospect, what has been their experience. Remember,
Yeah.
um, okay. Next slide, please. Ha, you're kidding me. Sarah has a question. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, actually, it's a comment. I mean, I was listening to what Benji was saying about the fiduciary or sponsor, but I think that the situation with Oasis, it was also Latinx Unidos of South Sound.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't the agency because we were under their umbrella for many years. It was the new administration. So
Really
how do you manage that when they change leadership? Do you investigate the new person, the newcomer, the new director? Because actually it wasn't the agency, it was the person that took over.
yeah. It's true. I think it's hard to know what to do in that situation quite because like I was sort of in the mix too, wanting to give as much credit to a new person and wanting to give them leash to do something great as well. So I'm not sure is the long and the short of it. I'm not sure I have a clean answer for you, other than I don't know that the board was even getting the right information, to be honest with you, in that case. And so I just don't know. Like looking back, I'm not sure what I've learned other than be super cautious before
I
going into those kinds of relationships at all. But I welcome other thoughts.
I think, well, based on that whole experience, because I live it on my own too, as part of the Latinx Unidos, I think we need to do a lot of board development where people learn too, as a board member, that you have a legal and financial responsibility if these things happen, and then you pay more attention to many other things. So I don't know if that is something that this group be interested in doing later to teach, to help people to understand and the responsibilities of becoming a board member and what things you need to look for. I mean, you telling us about this to teach us how to get some money, but I think also looking for the board members and the reputation in the community, I think, in my opinion, is important.
Yes.
It is really important. I just realized I was looking for some materials to put in the chat on board development, etc. Tony, Daniel, will you remind me to email that to you all when you do the minutes or send out the next correspondence regarding this so that I can include them? There are some checklists out there and best practices on board development and knowing what the board's responsibilities are and documents that they see on a regular basis. One of the organizations that I participate in right now, we are going through an issue where our current fiduciary agency or organization had a change of leadership. And what we found is that when your agreement is pretty clear on who does what, and you include in there that there will be regular reports to us, the organization, right? And that the fiduciary agents, board members, quarterly or periodically receive a financial update and a report on how we're doing. There puts a level of accountability there so that even when staff change, the board knows that this is an important project and an important agreement, and that your organization is an important partner or collaborator. That really helps. And then within your own organization, whatever the accountability loop is, if there's an executive committee or if there is an ad hoc committee or an advisory board, that similarly in the fiduciary agreement, the reports that are submitted to the funder are all for that project are also submitted and must be presented to your group's advisory board, executive committee, ad hoc committee, etc. So that as people change, which they do, folks come and go from your fiduciary agent, from your own organization, there is a level of accountability because it's in the contract that says you have to share this information. And these are the people who are responsible for sharing that information. So in the agreement, you not only want to put the names of the persons who are responsible for making sure that information is shared, but also the role that they play. So in the event, for example, if it's the CFO and the CFO changes, or if it's the program administrator and the program administrator changes positions, that role knows that that's their job. Whoever has it, that becomes a part of their responsibility. So those are some of the things that you can do. I mean, you can't, again, we would love to hear more if you have any other suggestions, but those are some of the things that you can do so that if there are changes, at least there's a loop in there in the contract that says this follows that person and these are the accountability entities that are responsible for knowing what's going on with this particular agreement. Okay. All right, y'all. It's 2:09 and we still got time. I know somebody has a question out there. Please, someone might have a comment. Do enlighten us. Oh, Tatiana, does CPI,
That's me, Cynthia. Collaborative Partners Initiative, and I didn't want to put, but I'm sorry, Tatiana, I'm doing that on the spot. I know you've, CPIN has helped a couple of the partners that we work with around some board development materials, and I just wondered if you had anything to share too, just in the spirit of collaboration. And I can follow up too, Cyn.
Yeah, no worries. We may want to put CPIN's contact info and the step with Cynthia's info that we send out as another resource because they do a lot of technical assistance training in a whole variety of subjects, but definitely in this governance space, they're one of the best, I think, doing work locally right now.
okay.
You guys are taking it easy on us today.
I know.
It's the after lunch thing, maybe. Everybody's still digesting.
Hi, this is Sue Reyes. I have a question.
Great.
Yeah, will you guys be available for questions or support relative to creating this proposal? And if so, how can we contact you?
Sure. So I will put my email right here. Oops, I should use my health department one. Sorry. I'm happy to review stuff. Just know that per Cynthia's disclaimers earlier, I know as much as I know, but I don't know everything. So I will give you my absolute best. I've done a lot of work over the last 30 years, so happy to look at stuff for folks.
Same as Benji, thank you. Same disclaimer, and I did put that information in there, or my contact information. Glad to look at it. We do provide technical assistance sessions periodically, and we work with technical assistance providers. And so there may be times when there is availability with our technical assistance providers to look at some materials. It just sort of depends on what the status of our contracts are with them. So, but I would be more than happy to. And let me just say this. I know I'm one of these people. I am last minute Lucy. I really am. I procrastinate. I admit that. If you find yourself in that situation, the response time that you might need for us to look at it might be not as quick as you think. So the earlier, the better. And sometimes it's good to just talk through things So I would just encourage you when you finish with your proposal, read it out loud and have a couple other people around. And, you know, again, if you want to include me on it and send a Zoom, that's great. But food for thought.
Thank you. Mhm.
Well, I mean, the in terms of parting shots, all I can think of these days is how much the community needs all of us to be working together and keep at the work, keep doing it joyfully, keep supporting each other, create spaces like this where we can compare notes, right? I am very grateful to you all for the work that you're doing. There's a lot of power in this room today, and lots of organizations that aren't here too that are doing just tremendous work in the community. And as we think about next week, Thanksgiving, I'm very, very thankful for what you all do. And just know that Cynthia and I have been here. We're going to be here. We welcome a relationship with you all. We'll see what happens in terms of workshops and stuff next year and kind of where we take this body of work. But know that we're not going anywhere. We're in the fight with you in the trenches, and really look forward to connecting and seeing all of the outcomes of your labors.
Yes, absolutely. Do practice self-care. I want to say that again. Do practice self-care. You can't pour into the communities that you serve and address those problems and those needs if you first haven't made sure that your own vessel is rested and have good stuff in it. And if your vessel is filled with fatigue and frustration and disappointment and anger, then that's what you're going to pour out. So take care of yourself, put good stuff in your vessel so that you can come back and pour out that good stuff in the community. And give yourself some grace. This is hard work. It really is. And it's hard because you care. If you didn't care, it'd be really easy. And caring is needed to do this work. So you're commended for caring. So practice self-care, extend yourself some grace, and remember, you can do it.
Thank you so much, Benji and Cynthia, for your wisdom. And I actually just wrote that down. You're going to pour out what's in your vessel. So perfect timing as we head into a holiday season and think about gratitude, and yeah, just lots of change. So thank you very much. Just as a reminder to folks, we won't have a November meeting of Communities of Focus nor December. So this is it for us for the year. And again, Benji and Cynthia, thank you so much for being on this journey with us and sharing all of your wisdom and time with folks. So we really deeply appreciate you. And we'll stay on if anybody wants to ask a question or check in about anything. But if not, then we wish you good health, good fortune. And we'll see you in the new year, if not sooner. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing hope for us. Thank you.